This is the annotation is the most important annotation you need to get. Repository REST resources. That means if you don't have any controller, any resource service implementation, just simply annotate this one, and that means that all the user registration has automatically has some endpoints, like you have a CRUD operations endpoints. It has a delete, update, and operations. This is the default exposure of your domain models or your models. Just simply, then in that case, you don't need nothing to do. Just you need simply annotate with this a Spring repository, give it the resource collections names, and then path name, and that's all. Then that means this the entity model will expose as a REST API endpoint. It should have contained different information into the URL in the attribute and contain the other information. But it is working, like basic CRUD operation is working with. If you annotate this, then you can. But that's why I will say this is our possibility to give it to you. How can you handle it? You have all the possibility. When you annotate like that way, that means you don't care about the controller, don't care about service implementation and service interface implementation or service implementation. It will automatically did your operations. That's I said this dependency Spring REST repository dependency that's we also imported to the our when we did the project generations. That's but those who don't know, but just Google it, you get the idea. So it's that means if you annotate that, it's automatically build your all endpoints that's you need or that's you define. That's the system automatically define it. So user registration endpoints, you see that we annotate like we just enterprise extend our user registration, the standard the repository, the CRUD repository, and the rest. That means this is our control. We need to implement ourselves as a professional way. That's I said this is the professional way to do. Just you define your own yourself to define your service and define the service implementations, and you have all control of that one. For this case, you have really less control because it's automatically system the Spring REST API, this Spring REST repository automatically build the endpoints that you need. So it's less control, but it still works. So it has control with that one, and this is the CRUD operations. They're exactly the same thing. This is second operation. It is a duplicated one. This one, so you can remove this one. So that means you define your all models, you define your all the repository that you need. Depending which type of repository you try to use, you have a possibility to default definition of your repository, or you can use your own repository, own repository interface, and implement the resource. That's I will look for next one. A repository, CRUD repository, or paging sorting repository, or JPA repository, and then so on and so forth. So we done our model part, we done our repository part, and then now we need to go with the service implementation. We define the services that we need. We just like very simple service interface. For this case, really one example I list you all user, you can do all things: CRUD operation, create, update, delete, and then other operations. That's we need simple example. We started, that's I said we started the implementation. One example how can show you how can it started this one. And registrations, you see, have the CRUD operations. It has the add, delete, update, and then find one, and then find all user registration. That's I mean. So basic CRUD operation interface just is completed, and then this is the another CRUD operation example. Like you define the interfaces, and then you have the possibility implement the interfaces. So we try to implement the interfaces. Very simple interfaces. There's two possibility to implement the interfaces. So you have the REST template. That's if you try to use the REST template, you can do Redis template, the hash operation, just very simple operation. The construct you can set this the Redis template and hash operations. We initialize the hash operations and put the keys, add the ID and user registration, put the an update and delete, and then find user registration. Very simple. For here, this case, you see that this is our repository insertion. So this one and this one. This we define our only single interface that we are talking about, and this is the only interface that we implemented it. And then you see that we define the private user registration repository that we define as a CRUD repository extension. That's okay. And just you simply use the constructor, or you can annotate it whatever private, and then that's all. We don't need to constructor here, but this example how can. So you use the repository and find all method, iterate to each role and add the roles, and then it's a lambda expression with Java 8. We can do add or find all and return the list of objects and return the user roles. So here if I go to this one, no, it is the implementation based on the REST template and hash operation. You can go this way also, and this is the operation that we need. So we inject our dependency, that's a repository that we define here, extend the CRUD repository, and then we use this CRUD repository into our implementation. So we implement the implementation, we could build the constructor, and then we say that we have, if we check that null and it's not ID is null, then save methods from the repository, CRUD repository, and insert the project, insert the your object, and that's all. If it is not null, an ID object itself is not null, ID is not null, then we save the object. If it's all are null, then return the new object, so blank empty object. That means it doesn't save anything into the database, into the your data structure. And find all registrations are very simple. Just return the list of user registrations and find all methods. Very, very simple implementations. And then find specific user. So based on the ID, find one methods and return find one. And then delete method, find it, delete, find one. From the first call, from the find one, you see these methods calling, find one. If it's find one, and then delete the record, and after that if it is not found, and return the empty list. And update, it's get the first one to delete to call the find one, the specific ID that you pass it, and then you update information into the object, and then save it into the object, and that's all. So basic CRUD operation, that's complete. If you need a complex one, just you can get the projection query, and then so on and so forth, and it works automatically. So model definition done, repository definition done, our interfaces, our service implementation interface is done, and implement the services based on the different possibilities. You can use the Redis template, or you can also use the hash map options, Redis hash map option that I will talk about this one. And then even though we can go our standard approach. That in a standard approach means this have a really professional structure, that's I mean here, the professional way we are doing. And this is the all control your side, all checks, all things is possible to here. The checking, and then all things, null point exception, you can throw the new exceptions, manage your conditions. Maybe you need to more control with the other data, maybe third party data coming here. We iterate through this the data and then inject the data. This is the use case I have in the different REST services with the different databases. You can follow the how can the different use cases has handled, manipulate or control those implementations depending. Maybe this data coming from the UCSB files or third-party REST API call. Just call it and then build your API, inject the services, build implementation here, and set the data here, and then automatically do your batch job also. It depends how you build it, how you design it. But professional way, that's I said, this is the professional way, and now this is, you need to find out the use cases, how can you handle these things together. So so model done, repository implementation, calling by extending the repositories, and then service implementation, interface definition done, implement the services based on the your approach, what you need and how you can do it. And finally, we need our controller. This is resource, you can also name that as the like package name as a controller. Controller means the you REST controller definitions. So service implementation, implement service implementation, you can have a REST controller, and this is, I said, standard structure to handle it. So let's